Well, welcome everyone to Love vs. Hate. My name is Anne, and I'm your old-fashioned nerd.
And I'm Emily, your mainstream millennial.
And on this podcast, Emily and I like to debate and argue about the things in life that we love and that we hate.
And I'm very nervous and also excited about this one because I think Anne, I don't know how she's going to react to this one, but I'm excited to share my TV show pick for this episode. I've told Anne a little bit about the show before, and the show that we're going to be talking about is Euphoria.
Yes. Emily, I will always remember when you were like, oh my gosh, I started this new show, and I kind of want to save it for the podcast, but I feel like I should tell you about it. And I was like, yeah, you can just tell me about it. And you're like, okay, great. And then you just dive right in.
Yeah, so I kind of want to keep the intro brief because I'm going to have Anne watch the first episode. But I want to tell you guys a little bit about the show. And some trigger warnings because this is a pretty controversial show before we get into it. And then you guys can decide for yourself if you haven't already seen it, if it sounds like something that would be interesting for you to watch.
You like the controversial stuff, don't you?
I really do, I guess.
Do.
So Euphoria is a show that you can watch on HBO. It's an HBO original, but it is an American adaptation of the Israel show. It started in Israel, which that's interesting. I've never heard of any shows from Israel.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm sure they have shows there though.
Oh, well, yeah. We just, we don't always get them in the US or watch them. Yeah, but that's interesting. Okay, continue.
Yeah, so there's one season out right now, which aired in 2019, and I think there's 9 or 10 episodes possibly in the first season, and then production for season 2 is supposed to start, but then, of course, COVID hit, and so then they decided that, in place of filming season 2, they still wanted to get something out for the fans, so they made 2 special episodes that features 2 of the characters.
Oh, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And they're out now, or are they coming out? Oh,
yep,
okay.
they came out around Christmas and New Year's. So it was kind of like a little special for that time. And it was basically, it's like the character, it's kind of like a monologue for each character. And there's maybe 1 or 2 other characters throughout that episode. And then production 2 started back up. So I'm really excited to watch season 2. But basically, a little synopsis about the show is that it's about just a bunch of high schoolers and their life and all the problems and challenges that they face.
And this is an R rating, right? It gets pretty...
Yeah, so here's the trigger warnings. I might have missed some. You might just want to look up the trigger warnings for Euphoria before you watch. But the show talks and shows drug and alcohol abuse, nudity, sex, rape, abuse, pretty much everything you can think of, it has on the show. So just be wary of that before you go in. If any of that stuff is triggering to anybody, then I would always just warn you against it or just think about it before you watch. Each episode has trigger warnings before it starts. But basically, the main character is Rue, who is played by Zendaya, which Anne might know.
I do know Zendaya mostly because of The Greatest Showman, and also she is in Spider-Man. So,
yes.
Yeah.
She, fun fact that Anne probably doesn't know, she actually got her start on Disney Channel. She's a Disney Channel star.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
It somehow doesn't surprise me though. What was she on?
I've never actually seen the show, but it's called Shake It Up.
Oh.
And basically it's she's a dancer, I think, with Bella Thorne, who's also another
don't know her.
Star.
Yeah, don't know.
So she was on that, and this is one of the reasons why she wanted to do this show was to get rid of her Disney star name label.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like, this show is the 180-degree opposite of Disney, and I want to do something different. And so part of that was doing Euphoria.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense because even with Spider-Man, that's still technically under the Disney label, so she didn't really get away with that. But, it's Marvel. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, it's a little bit less childish / Disney Channel,
but still, yeah.
But Euphoria is a whole new level. Oh my gosh. I was trying to tell Anne, I was like, yo, you need to just, I don't know how you're going to react because there's a lot going on. And she's like, I've seen the Peaky Blinders. And I'm like, Yeah, that's a good like stepping stone to sort of be on the same level, not really. But yeah, basically Rue, Zendaya's character, narrates the whole first season, and everything's kind of from her point of view. But in each episode, we learn a little bit more about each character. I kind of compare it to 13 Reasons Why in that sense, where they like kind of delve into each character each episode, which we also have a previous episode that we've done on 13 Reasons Why if you want to check that one out too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I remember like being intrigued by it. Wasn't like when I remember watching 13 Reasons Why, we just watched the first episode, and I was like, okay, I'm like intrigued by this idea of like almost kind of starting at the end sort of and working your way backwards and trying to piece together, you know, like why this happened. And so like it was intriguing to me, but I never did watch any more of it.
Yeah. Oh, and one thing that I will say with Euphoria, I literally watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, and I was like, every time I was watching it, I was like, why am I watching this? What is this? This is so weird. Why do I continue to watch? But after the first 3 episodes, I was like hooked. So just give it a chance. If it sounds interesting, you just gotta like get through the first couple episodes to get used to the art, quote unquote. But yeah, that's all I kind of really want to talk about before I have Anne watch, and then we'll come back with just a little more Anne's thoughts, a little more of my thoughts on why I like the show and everything else like that. So are you ready, Anne?
I think so.
Okay,
let's do it.
Okay, so we just finished the first episode. Anne, what are your initial thoughts?
I can see why you like it, because I think I do enjoy like when there's a narrative and it's like played with a lot, where like I liked that Rue was the narrator, and yet there were other characters that like, and it wasn't a linear narrative. Mm-hmm. Like it had, you know, kind of some flashbacks at times. It had like pieces that happened before, but then they showed the later, and like vice versa. And I always like to when there's a narrator and they can kind of like speak into it a little bit. Like with that one character, she's like, oh, she told me the story after, you know. And so like I really enjoy pieces that do that, because it just kind of gets you thinking in different ways. So I liked that aspect. And so I think that's an aspect you probably enjoy as well, when it's like that more like non-linear narrative. I did enjoy a lot of the lighting. Like I like that artsy stuff. I have an appreciation for that. And it was very, very stylized, which I always like enjoy. Mm-hmm. It also had some unique turns and twists that I wasn't really expecting. I was like, whoa. So it definitely, I would say it was intriguing, and I didn't hate it. But it was like out there the whole time. I'm like, did people actually do this in high school? Because like, I do not relate to this in any way.
Yeah. So this episode, I would say, is like, I think the second episode is where it gets like, whoa, this is a lot.
Yeah.
Because I was reading articles, I totally forgot about what happens in the second episode, but there's a lot of things that go on there that like really caught people off guard and got people talking. But yeah, I definitely love the character development that you'll see throughout the show, learning about all like the other characters that we were kind of introduced to in this first episode. I really like Rue as the narrator, and sometimes she's unreliable narrator.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I liked that too. That was fun.
Yeah. And then I really like the music in this season. I'm not sure what's going to happen next season, but this whole first season, there's an artist called Labyrinth who basically wrote like the main songs and writes all of the kind of like ambient songs that like kind of play throughout. And there's some like pop songs on there that you would hear, probably not on the radio, but like Beyonce and other rappers and things. But for the most part, it's all Labyrinth's music, which
he did like the soundtrack to it.
Yeah. So I really liked that part. I'm playing the songs in the office, like on repeat sometimes.
Yeah. I just hear Emily go, Alexa, play Labyrinth.
Uh-oh, she might have heard you. But yeah, that's another thing that I really like about the show is the music. And then also, I really like the diversity. There's like a lot of different types of characters, and also just the diverse topics that they cover is very different than what you would see.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand why it's a little controversial. I mean, they definitely dive into some pretty deep stuff.
Yeah.
And some heavy stuff, with like, drugs and that kind of thing. But like I said, I definitely enjoy a good nonlinear narrative, and that was something I was liking a lot. I liked hearing Rue's perspective and hearing her as the narrator. That was really intriguing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading an article last night from The Guardian, and I learned a bunch of new stuff, so I wanted to share it. So basically, the show, the American adaptation, is written by Sam Levinson and directed by him. And a lot of the story is from his perspective, because when he was young, he was like dealing with drug addiction on all of this. Mm-hmm. So in the article, he said that he wanted the story and characters to feel less like a docu-series and more about how they were feeling, because throughout the whole season and her special episode that she has later, like, I somehow relate to her as a character so much, even though she is a drug addict, and on the surface, we have nothing in common.
Yeah.
But he said that even though she's a drug addict, many people can relate to her still. It's really hard to depict a drug addict without an audience feeling judgmental towards them, but Zendaya brings a humor, a warmth, and a fragility. She's the beating heart of it. You empathize with her in a way that I could never imagine. Tapping into having that kind of compassion for something going through addiction is really important to that person's eventual sobriety. Which, yeah, if you guys watch or have seen the show, like, maybe you guys can relate to that as well or feel the same thing. Because, like, yeah, I definitely connected with Rue's character. She's my, like, favorite character, sort of. I think Fez is my favorite character, who's the drug dealer, but...
Yeah. I could see why. He seemed like somebody who, like, could have a lot of interesting, like, parts to play. Like,
yeah. But, yeah, so overall, Anne, do you think that you would be on the side of loving or hating? Or do you think that you're going to continue to watch the series? I know that you don't really have HBO, but you can come over and watch it.
Yeah. It intrigues me a lot, so, like, whenever a show kind of, like, intrigues me, I do want to, like, continue watching it. And I know you had mentioned that for you, it took you a few episodes to get in before you were, like, really into it. It is one of those things, though, that, like, I do understand the controversy. Like, there was one moment where I literally turned to Emily and was like, I hate this. I don't like this. I don't like this. So, like, it does, push you a little bit. It makes you uncomfortable because there are things that happen that are very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So I think, understanding that perspective a little bit, like, I understand why you connect with that character. Like, even if you don't necessarily have similar experiences or you never went through something similar, like, you can just empathize with what they're going through and why. Like, when she talked a little, like, they didn't go too much into this first episode, but they talk a little bit about how and why Rue got into drug addiction. Mm-hmm. And, like, you can empathize with that. So whenever you have that sort of, like, empathy element happening, like, that does intrigue me. So ultimately, I would consider watching it again, but it definitely would be pushing my boundaries a little bit, because it's like there were things that I was like, I don't like this.
I think if you can stick it out, you'll be, like, obsessed like I am. Or you'll find some sort of, like, you'll be happy you did it at the end. You'll be like, wow, that was crazy, but somehow I liked it.
Yeah. Well, and I can, like, appreciate things that they do push boundaries. They are controversial, but if they're getting you talking and having new conversations and new perspectives, I can appreciate things that do that. So,
yeah. One other thing to note, if there are any minors listening to this, like, although the show is featuring minors, like, everyone in the show basically are high school students, the show, they, like, really want everyone to know that the audience, like, is not this. The show isn't meant for minors to watch.
No, yeah, definitely not.
Even though it's about minors, it is not for minors. So just go into that knowing that.
Yeah, this is an adult show for sure.
Yeah, and like Anne was saying, like, she watched it, and even I watched it, and I was like, these things happen? Like, I have never, like, what? But yeah, these things do happen every single day to people, and we just don't even realize it because we're living our own lives.
Yeah.
And that's like the crazy part to me. It's like, these aren't just fake scenarios. These happen to real people.
Yeah, and it's honestly sad. Yeah, and I mean, even you said the author, like, you know, he was writing from his own experience. So yeah, I think it's important to understand that these things do happen so that, you know, if you can, like, learn how to help people, like, that's important because it's really sad, and something that, yeah, we don't always know about or think about because we're not experiencing it in our own lives.
So listeners, I would be very interested if you have seen the show. What are your thoughts? Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? If you haven't seen it, are you planning on watching it? Let me know. You can let us know on our social over at Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Love vs. Hate Podcast. So I guess that brings us to our life lessons.
I think my life lesson is kind of a serious one, but I do think it's important when you are choosing, like, what kind of shows to watch. Like, I think it's important to have good reasons to do it, you know? Like, it's important to get other perspectives. It's important to also, like, if this show, like, doesn't make you feel good, or if it's, like, you know, if it's not meant for you, that's okay. Like, you don't have to watch certain things. Like, this show is not meant for minors. Would never recommend it for somebody who's a minor. So, like, it's important to, like, have those boundaries, but also I do think it's important to explore things that might push your boundaries a little bit, just to create new conversations, maybe getting you think of new perspectives. So, like, know your boundaries, know what's good for you, know, like, what show, you know, what kind of content is good for you, but also be willing to, like, try new things.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And, like, I remember even when 13 Reasons Why came out, like, there was a lot of controversy in that it was, like, glamorizing, like, suicide or whatever all those claims were. So yeah, definitely, like, know your limits and know what you can watch and what you can't watch, what will be triggering to you, and, like,
yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
What's your life lesson, Emily?
My life lesson is to add Labyrinth to your playlist.
That's kidding. A good one, actually.
No, seriously.
It is good. It's good music.
But my life lesson is to just be safe in a new town.
Yes. That's a very good one. That was, yeah, I was like, oh no, my crime junkie senses are going off. There was a part where, yeah, this thing was happening to a girl who's new to town. And I was like, no, don't do it. My crime junkie senses.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I think just, like, watch out with your surroundings and what's going on in your life. Like, this is just in general, but it happened to a character. So yeah, just, like, look out for yourself. Look out for your friends.
I was just gonna say that
have
too.
Have their best interests at heart. So yeah, I feel like that applies to, like, every episode we could ever do. Is just
be safe and watch over yourself and your friends. That is a life lesson for life. I mean, all of our life lessons are for life. I mean, come on.